Right. All the options are now open, as in public. So we are taking your comments, of course, and your questions. If you are watching this now, it means that you've got the notifications turned on. And I can imagine we'll have one or two people watching, almost out of morbid curiosity, to see if our invited special guest makes an appearance this time around. It's the top of the hour. I've started a little bit late because, well, yes, Bill Sienkiewicz hasn't arrived yet. Into the blue, mister. I've been waiting for this for a month. No pressure. Yeah, I've been waiting quite a while for this. Got one or two people watching on Facebook, one or two people watching on YouTube. Thank you so much indeed for joining us. Let us know where you're watching from. I think we may have a little bit of meandering at the top of the hour because, well, Bill hasn't arrived yet. But I'm being very optimistic. He's got the list. He's got the link. He's ready to go. And I did receive an email. Hi, Clydeen. Pleasure to see you on the stream, on the comments. Welcome along. Yes, the comment was, and this was at 2 o'clock this afternoon, so 4 hours ago. All good. Speak with you soon. So we'll see what happens. Aaron Neighbors, hola from San Diego. Just to explain, I mentioned Clydeen Nee there. I just want to wish her all the very, very best. Because Clydeen, if you don't know, is the person that puts together the Artist Alley at San Diego Comic-Con, which means she's got herself an additional challenge this time round. For the virtual con, it's going to be, I can imagine, something slightly different. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what San Diego Comic-Con do, and also what Clydeen gets up to, and how the artists are going to be represented on screen. So, fingers crossed. Really, I'm really rooting for Clydeen and for what Comic-Con International got planned for next month for Comic-Con at Home. We've been talking about it a lot on the show, and we'll be supporting it. If you saw also the update with the incredible Ray Bradbury inspired cover. So they are effectively running Comic-Con International as it's going to be a full San Diego Comic-Con, with panels running exactly the same as you would have Thursday through Sunday. So I think they're going to be running an actual programmed panel lineup. Clydeen Nee, I hear there's going to be lots of things planned for the YouTube channel, so join the Talkin blog. Absolutely. Tina Gann's watching. Hey, I'm still awake. Thank you so much indeed for coming along, Tina. If you didn't catch the live stream with Tina and Fred Van Lente, don't ask me how, but YouTube managed to lose it and deleted the entire episode. I found it on another one of our streams. I re-uploaded it. It's well worth checking out because it's a lot of fun. That was a good episode. Into the Blue, Mr. Wing It. Yes, I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking about things we can talk about. And hey, if you've been following drama on social media regarding a whole host of topics when it comes to the comics industry, we could get into a pretty serious conversation. And it's something that we could get into. Daniel Betts is watching from sunny Harlow. Welcome along, Daniel. And Into the Blue, Mister is reminding us of our guest that's coming, hopefully going to be coming along. I've got every one of Bill's sketchbooks. I spent so much time trawling eBay for them that I can now type his last name without looking. Likewise, so can I. Andrew Dickinson, so Hall H is going to finish at 3 a.m. Here in the UK, yes. That's how I suspect it would work. Considering that if anybody caught Fat Man Beyond, I watched the replay today of Kevin Smith and Mark Bernardin's session live from the Scum and Villainy Cantina in downtown LA. And it pretty much started off with the pair of them bantering off each other. Mark obviously has got something very exciting planned coming down the line, so that's something to do possibly with his writing, and really looking forward to seeing what he does, because he is, for me, one of the creators out there. Do check out his Plague Nerdologues. It's a very strange title, but very much well worth checking out. But Kevin at the top of that show did reveal that that he is going to be doing his Hall H panel, which is traditionally at the end of Saturday. Once you've got all your WBs and your well, you won't have WB this time around, your Marvels, all your big studio things, and they are going to be doing some studio panels, so presentations based around the various projects going to be coming up. All of that is going to be happening presumably as normal, and then right at the end you're going to have an hour and a half, 2 hours of Kevin Smith basically talking, extolling to camera. Now, I don't know how that's going to be any different to how he normally works, because that's what he does in front of his webcam usually. And I find Kevin Smith works better in front of an audience. It's one of those things, and you can understand why he still gets work in Hollywood, why he is still one of the most popular talkers out there, because you stick an audience in front of him, the man can fly. I get that. As a DJ myself, I understand there's a difference between talking to a camera and talking to an actual room for an audience. 6,500 people hanging on your every word, unless there's a Star Wars concert going off somewhere. Kevin Smith really is just something else. Andrew Dixon, Kevin Smith last year was absolutely manic, and he does feed off the room, absolutely. Matt Dunford's joining us. Hello. If things still remain a little bit quiet in terms of Mr. Sienkiewicz, let's have a look if we've got... he's having trouble logging in, by all accounts. We'll share the link again, and we'll see what happens. Bear with me a second. Let's see if we can just... and we'll see what happens. But apparently he's trying, so you never know. He may arrive at any second. So, but yeah. Loads of panels being kind of eked out. You're going to see them certainly on the unofficial blog, posting a whole bunch on that. You've got the eking out there, very much in the same way as you would get at the standard San Diego Comic-Con. And I suspect that 2 weeks out from the normal programming days, you're going to get exactly how you would get at a standard San Diego Comic-Con. 2 weeks before, you're going to be having the programming for Comic-Con at Home being released day by day. And I'm really curious to see how much content we're looking at, how we're going to be having the numerous tracks, the numerous programming. So in terms of what would be in Hall H, in Ballroom 20, in Indigo, in all the small rooms, and also those kind of the small rooms of the convention center, how that's going to go. I think it's going to be released in 2 weeks leading up to it. Andrew Dickinson is convinced that the shed lists are going to be going out as standard, as you would get in the application. Interesting. I'll be curious to see if there's enough content to justify that, but that'd be interesting. So there we go. Sarita P is joining us. Hello all. I think we will definitely talk about the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund, and I think we'll touch on that at the end of the show. It's something that I feel needs to be addressed. I do want to make sure that we cover things like that. It's safe to say that over the last 24, 48 hours, there's been quite a bit of an upheaval. The comics industry is kind of going through its own Me Too period. It did already, but now there's a lot of news and a lot of announcements and a lot of accusations. But we'll get into all of that, I think, at the back end of the show. We'll see what happens. Carol is joining us. Good morning from Junie, gloomy San Diego. That's interesting, considering that here in the UK, I've currently got the doors closed because I don't want to be disturbed by the cat, and I don't want to be just kind of like disturbed, but I really could do with some fresh air in this room because it's absolutely cooking here in the UK at the moment. Andrew Dickinson is mentioning, I think the word you're looking for is floodgate. It is. It does seem that there's just a raft of all of this, these revelations that have come out. Mark Gage, what's up with the con? If you're asking about, well, at the end of the day, San Diego Comic-Con isn't going ahead, or is going ahead in a virtual space. Comic-Con at home is what they're actually producing. They're lining it up very much like it will be as if it was actually for real, happening in a physical space, as though we had 170,000 people descending on San Diego as a city. They are treating it as though that's actually happening, to the point where, as a representative of press, that someone who reports on San Diego Comic-Con, we had to go into the press portal of the member ID. We had to apply for press, which means we're going to be getting all the emails as usual for interviews regarding exhibitors and dealers. We're going to be getting all of that. That's going to be interesting, how they're actually going to do it. So this is Smeg, I think 2 weeks before is a bad idea. Playing this like an actual Comic-Con is a bit tone deaf. People are not going to have the time off work, the people working, that is, and it might lead to a low audience. Maybe for the Thursday programming, and maybe a little bit for the Friday, but who knows? We'll see. We'll see how San Diego Comic-Con is going to go ahead. But that's all in a month's time. We're going to keep an eye on the programming, obviously, but how it will actually go ahead is entirely down to San Diego at this point, and we'll look for the program as it comes. We have somebody in a small window, and I'm going to bring him on
right now. Hey.
Hello there.
All right. Thanks, hon.
Welcome.
Hey, how are you?
Bill Sienkiewicz. Hello there.
Sorry for the script. I actually, hello.
Hello there.
So I'm so sorry for missing the last one. I don't know what the hell happened, but I'm not surprised.
I know exactly what happened.
that it all kind of goes sideways.
I know exactly.
Anyway,
what
good
happened.
to see you.
You too. I know exactly what happened. You were having multiple meetings that day. Your head was being pulled in several directions.
That's probably what it was. Yeah, I think so. It's it even under all of these lockdown scenarios that were, or the global one, it just seems to be in some respects busier than ever. But we're all adjusting to this this new technology, and not new technology, but like I think there's how many different kinds of streaming applications now? Yeah.
Platforms. Tell me about it.
There's Skype.
I think I've been very lucky in that I've managed to have maybe 2 Zoom calls. I just kept them really at a minimum. I've just really, I've kind of kept it to my live streams and just dealt with it with that. But Bill, it's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Great to be here.
Thank you so much indeed for coming
on.
Real
pleasure.
I mean,
thanks so much for the invitation.
Oh no, it's a pleasure. I mean, the last time, I met you in person at the last San Diego Comic-Con I went to in 2018.
I remember.
And that was, I mean, it was the preview night. It was a fun day anyway, because I'd just come from Kim Jong-gi's booth, which had blown my mind anyway. And then to come and speak to yourself as well. It was such a fun day. I mean, I think we might as well start, because this is a podcast which is primarily about conventions, and we'll get into your career and other bits and pieces as well. But we'll start with that. I mean, what is it about San Diego Comic-Con which makes that show just so special for you?
I think unlike other shows in the US, it feels like it's much more of a global convention. It feels more European in some respects. I mean, one of the things about European conventions like Luca or even UCAC, like you might mostly get people from the UK, where Luca, it's international, and San Diego certainly has that. Even New York to some extent has it, though not quite as much, because although they are making changes in New York, the Javits is not nearly as inviting as San Diego.
Right.
So,
I mean, I know that we've got this new virtual San Diego Comic-Con, which is, like I say, we were talking before you joined us. I don't know, is that something that you've been approached to participate in? Will you be doing something at Comic-Con at home? You are.
Yeah, yeah. Well, certainly with Sal Abenanti, who he handles Alex Ross's work and my work. So we're actually, and with Chris Roop at Roop's Comics, who handles a lot of the online stuff, we're sort of working together to present not only original art but also some kind of interactive kind of a thing as well. So. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it all shakes out. But yeah, I've been approached, and I'm definitely in for it. So
excellent. Looking forward to that. Yeah. I mean, when it comes to the pandemic and the way it just the very abrupt way that it sent the world sideways. I mean, what was your convention 2020 looking this year? I mean, what kind of show? I know you were doing Lake Como was lined up, and there were a couple of other shows. What was your convention year looking like this year?
I was trying to. Como I fell in love with, so that was a definite go. For me. I had a couple of other shows sort of lined up, but I was trying to keep it a little bit more open this year, if only because at the beginning of January, I bought a house in Los Angeles in the hills. And so there was no way I was not going to do Como, but I thought I'll be out of here. I'll be moved by then and everything will be somewhat normalized, quote unquote. But, then immediately upon getting a few things in there, the shutdown happened and stay at home, and they pretty much put a kibosh on any kind of moving and packing and stuff like that. So, so right now, I mean, thank God for the the interaction that we can have online. But my shows were there was probably maybe 3 shows that I had planned, plus a teaching gig in Kansas City, which would have been maybe a month or so ago.
Right.
But it was really kind of a little bit quieter this year in terms of the intended shows. But being what it is. How are you coping with all of the?
Well, I mean, I think my situation has been well documented on various episodes of this. This has been a COVID house. We have my father got struck with it. My wife had symptoms as well. My father, it knocked him absolutely for 6.
How is he now?
He is actually back in hospital, but that's more for monitoring, because the one thing that COVID does as a respiratory disease is it just totally destroys your lungs. So breathing's a big problem. So we learned in this house very, very quickly, it's not something to disrespect. So when we hear about lifting of restrictions and first waves, second waves, whether we're actually still out of a first wave, we don't disrespect COVID in this house whatsoever. So we've got masks everywhere and we're disinfecting, and we're doing what we can. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, that's good. I mean, I do wish your father well. Hope he's
thank you.
He's recovering nicely, and and you've been okay as well.
I've been okay, although I suspect I had COVID back in February, because I got struck with the mother of all chest infections. That did not feel normal. That didn't feel like a standard infection. So that was before we even knew what COVID was. Before it
now,
was
had
even
you had? Forgive me for asking. Had you had like bronchitis or things like that before?
No.
Or
this was something else.
Oh, interesting.
This was something else. For yourself, during lockdown, I mean, I know that you've been doing a lot of podcasts and live streams, including this one, and thank you so much for coming on. I mean, did it become a way to stay connected and talk to people or just to kind of stave off the boredom, as it were. I mean, what's been your lockdown like in that regard?
At first, it started. I mean, the running joke between fellow freelancers is that it's kind of a par for the course. It's almost like there's no real difference, But as time went on, it started to get a little crazier. I mean, I'm pretty much Punxsutawney Phil when it comes to conventions. I'll pop my head out or work. I'll pop my head out every now and then, sort of touch base with people, and then sort of scurry back to the shadows, to where the light sort of illuminates only what I'm working on, and everything else is sort of becomes secondary. But when I agreed to do a few of these early on, one thing that struck me was that I realized that I spend so much time by myself that when I actually have to speak with someone, I actually have to practice talking before I actually get online, because I'll realize that I sound like I've just awakened, or I'm just
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I actually have to speak out loud, So it's been fun to do it. I actually really have enjoyed the connection, and I think it really depends on who you are or what you're like as a person. But I find that I ended up realizing that how much I had missed the interaction with people, things that we do when we go to shows. And obviously, as you well know, I mean, one of the really wonderful things about the shows is not only getting to see, amazing art and panels and stuff like that, but just to reconnect with friends and, sit down, have a meal.
That is absolutely the thing that, I mean, you've been talking to so many people online, and while we're looking forward to all of the content that CCI is going to be announcing for July, that's not necessarily the reason why we go to San Diego. In that regard, we go for the community, we go for the friends that we make, and the family that we've made. I definitely have a convention family, and that is going to be difficult. It's going to miss that bunch this year. Yeah.
Well, do you think, now it's a question for you. I'm curious. How do you think we're going to change, or let's just keeping it on the convention scene, like if and when, well, I'm going to say when they relax all of this and it's safe to kind of actually get together, how do you think it's going to change the interactions, or I think going forward?
Within the next 12 months, I think you're going to be seeing a lot of, if anything, at a convention, it's very loose, in that the crowds almost organize themselves. They organize their own lines. They kind of create their own navigation. I think that's going to be a little bit more regimented. There's going to be a lot more tape on the floor. It's going to be a very organized kind of chaos. So I think there's going to be more of that. There's going to be, on an actual level of the crowd going to a convention, I think we're already being trained and conditioned to keep our distance from each other, just out of personal safety and safety of other people. So I think we're almost going to navigate it that way. For the interactions with talent, I think that's going to be difficult. I think we're not going to see so many legacy creators, because at the end of the day, they're not going to want to put themselves in a place of risk.
Sure.
So I think some real icons of the comic industry, they may decide to not get on the plane in the first place. So I think there's going to be some changes, but I think it's just going to be more of a slightly tighter ship. But that's down the line. That's July next year.
Sure.
That's what I'm thinking.
Right.
In the short term, I mean, we've been talking on the show about New York. That we think is a no-go. We can't see how it can work in Javits in this current climate.
Well, I think also because not only just simply because we don't know which wave we're in yet. Like as you said, it could be, certainly here in California, we're finding that even with the opening here in LA and California, and California's been pretty good in terms of keeping on top of it. But even so, there's been a spike since they've opened up. other areas of the country. I mean, even, bringing up the Tulsa experience. I mean, I think there were quite a few people that I mean, for all of the people, whether they got trolled or not, in terms of all of the, the K-pop bands, I do think that a lot more people, even in the denier camp, were probably a little bit more aware.
It's going to be a definite eye opener for that that side of the argument. Yeah.
But I think you're right, and I mean, one of the upsides or possible workarounds is that certainly with San Diego, I mean, as you know, when you're trying to leave the convention center at the end of the day, those crowds waiting to pass the trains, literally people are shoulder to shoulder. I think that's going to be an issue. But a lot more people, I think, will be selecting cosplay where they actually have masks that are part of the deal. We
brought that up on the last episode. We thought lots of Banes, lots of Hannibal Lecters.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to see a lot of that. When it comes to the San Diego Convention Center, though, I think one of its primary design advantages is just the amount of doors and the ability to have a very controlled in and out of a crowd, and a real good way of monitoring and crowd control.
That's a really good point. I mean, one of the things I also think is because they have the new technology with the chips, when you beep in. I mean, it's not inconceivable that they're going to have people there with temperature monitors to make sure that anybody coming in, but I do think that whatever they call the new normal, I do think that just simply on a human level, forget like even the aspect of the economy and everything else. I mean, we are a social species, and I think that we like the idea that I mean, like you said, going to the shows is really about San Diego specifically in this case. It's it's about the weather, and it's about being able to see so many great people and go to terrific restaurants, et cetera, et cetera. All of those things that we sort of took for granted for all of those years, each one is going to need to be addressed. As far as New York, I mean, I don't know if the Javits is still
well, that was a question,
like a part hospital now or not.
Yeah. Well, that was the question I asked of a couple of guests, and unfortunately, they hadn't actually been to New York Comic Con. This was Fred Van Lente, who hadn't. I thought he'd gone, so I asked the question. You've been to the building.
Many times.
Yeah, so you know the building itself. Like I say, San Diego has that kind of like inbuilt ability because of the amount of access points. What's the Javits Center like in terms of actually crowds getting into it and getting out of it? Is the similar kind of mechanics built into the design of the building?
They actually only allow entrance at one specific area, and they have it set up with metal detectors and bag inspections, so literally like you're going through the airport.
Right.
And then they have readers. They have individual people with the actual scanners, as opposed to San Diego where you just swipe yourself in. When you leave, that's a whole. I mean, there are plenty of other exits, but it's a little bit more like Attack on Cell Block 13 in New York, and just simply also the environment around the area. Even though they're doing complete renovation of that whole area, because years ago, when New York had a number of smaller shows like at the Roosevelt and one-day shows, the problem there was that they were small. So New York trying to get everybody into the Javits was great, but there were really no hotels nearby. I mean, you'd have to either cab it someplace many blocks away.
Yeah.
I even when I lived in Connecticut, which was an hour away by train, I would still try to find a hotel nearby. Or if I was lucky, one of my friends who was on a TV show had a place way uptown, and he let me stay at his apartment on the Upper West Side, which was great. But
Well,
getting,
it's like Thought Bubble here. I mean, Harrogate and Leeds, it's 20 minutes away from me. But
right.
when we go to that, we want to stay in a hotel because we want it to be a trip
it's
away. We want it to be
absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I've talked to Tula quite often. I mean, I've been invited to Thought Bubble, and she and I are in contact constantly. It's, you know, that I think I'd even said, like, this is going to be the year I'll be there, you know. And it's so you know, it is something to look forward to. I think not only to see everybody and to kind of get back into the swing of things, but also just to, you know, meet people again in real life, you know, and just talk to them. It's like that sense of being liberated, you know. And because it's really easy with the escapism that comics allow. There is that familial aspect to it. It would be really, really nice to be able to meet up with people and actually talk about the work and talk about, you know, as opposed to with this sort of Damocles hanging over everyone's head, you know. So
we had Declan Shalvey on a couple of episodes ago, and I actually asked that question because the question was, at a convention and when you're talking to somebody, how many questions does it take to actually kind of have an actual conversation with somebody and talk about something which isn't comics? And Declan turns around and goes, no, I just want to talk about comics. I love talking about comics. I love talking about comic art. I love nerding out and talking about craft and stuff.
Yeah, that's funny. That's great. That's great. I think that's he's pretty much speaking for a lot of people right now. Well, you know, there was a show that happened here. What was it, a month or two ago? I don't know. I forget where it was. Was it Florida or Atlanta? They were trying to have some small show here in the States.
Well, I know Tampa is
it was
due.
Tampa. Yeah. And I think I don't think it I think if anything, it sort of proved how premature that was, you know. So but this is the biggest convention, obviously, aside from, say, Sun in Europe, like Luca or whatever. But it'll be interesting to see how they translate the convention experience, which is all about interaction with, you know, I mean, there is, in a weird way, this is, you know, there's Hall H where you see the celebrities, and then you see people online where you can actually have a lot of people, you know, actors, writers, whatever, who can sort of, you know, come together in the, you know, without having to travel. But again, it's not quite the same as seeing them in person, et cetera, et cetera. So, but I'll be curious to see how it goes. I'm really hoping it does well, if only to prove that, you know, fans are solidly behind the conventions, but also because I don't think anybody really prefers to have an online convention, but it'll do in a pinch, you know. So, and, you know,
at the end of the day, it's not like we have a choice.
Right, that's true.
We have, for our sake and for everybody else's sake, it has to be the way that it goes.
Right. Now, if
we've got plenty of people. Oh,
okay. I had a quick question for you. How many shows do you usually do a year?
I usually hit around anywhere between 13, 15, something like that.
Okay.
Last year a little bit more because we decided that we weren't going to go to San Diego last year because funds really were quite tight. So we decided we were going to come back bigger, bolder, badder, better in 2020. Nicely. Great. So we did a whole bunch of shows, certainly in the UK last year. So we did more than our fair share, and I also panel hosted more shows last year as well.
Right.
So I got invited to a whole bunch. So no, I did more shows last year than I would usually do, but we were all kind of geared up and ready to go for this summer, and then the hammer dropped.
Well, how did you like doing the shows, your show, from the conventions? That must have been wonderful, actually.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean 2010 was my first San Diego Comic-Con. 2012 was my first. I put together a UK attendees group, so I was starting to become a little bit more bigger and I was involved in the online community. 2014, I appeared on my first panel. 2015 was my first panel hosting. So it's literally it's snowballed really in a very short space of time.
Right.
So I then again, my training is as a mobile DJ with a microphone in my hand, with a crowd in front of me. You put a crowd in front of me, I'll tear a roof off. But it's that's the difference. I mean, you can do sessions like this, and I'm enjoying talking to you. Thank you so again.
Oh no, it's absolutely my pleasure. I still owe you one from the one that I missed, so we can do this again sometime. Hopefully, we'll get a chance to eventually do it in person. You know,
I have no problem with
right now, it's like I would love to do it again.
But put a crowd in front of me though, and it's a different ball game. It's the other reason why I like doing these live sessions, because just to remind everybody, I am keeping a track on your questions the best I can. We have got a whole bunch of
sure. No, okay. I don't want to, I'll be here for as long as you need me. So
thank you. So we've got plenty of those to get into. So, but on your question, to have an audience and to, the way that I do these shows, this is very much for the audience. It's for the convention community and fans of comics in general and pop culture to just come together and celebrate the events that we would normally go face to face. I mean, when it comes to those convention highlights and those interactions with fans, I mean, are there any that kind of jump out in mind as those highlights of a convention where a fan has come up and said hi?
Yeah, there's always the sort of fun ones that where I look at conventions as a chance to really meet the people that allow me to put food on my table, so to speak. So it's like I don't take any of that for granted. So meeting fans.
Sure.
And again, my love of the medium. So, and getting to see fellow pros that I don't get a chance to see as well, but having some, really wonderful interactions with fans. I've usually, even though I tend to be quite a bit more vocal about politics and stuff like that, I do find that at shows, any of the, let's say, far right kind of people, they tend to stay away, from me.
I think from conventions in general, I mean, when you talk about the liberal arts, that's pretty much what we're dealing with at conventions. But I mean, when I've spoken to people in lines and whatever, I meet people from all sides of the political spectrum. But I think at conventions, it's more a case of, okay, that gets left at the door.
It really does, yes. Yeah, I've even had people who have actually come to me and said, even though I may not agree with everything you post or whatever, but when they come where they're actually talking about a specific issue or a character, it actually acts as a very nice kind of peace pipe, so to speak. To use that phrase. It allows for a bit of detente, to kind of get in there where you're really just talking about the art. And then there've been the wonderful kind of experiences at shows where in New York and in New York, I think a year or so ago, I got to see friends like Taika, Waititi, who would literally come by the booth and get a chance to talk, or other people that I don't see except perhaps because they live so far away. So just that little bit of human contact, or being able to sit down and maybe grab a drink or a meal is a nice thing, But
what's the percentage of people coming to kind of bow at the altar of Sienkiewicz, and those that are really kind of the up and coming artists that want to know craft, that want to know industry? I mean, how many? What's the kind of percentage? And do you really? Because there's only so much time. Time is kind of finite at conventions.
Right.
I can imagine that those conversations you really want to spend some time and help up and coming artists?
Yeah, and I do. And if I'm at smaller shows, one thing I've had to do is sort of cut back on a lot of the portfolio reviews that I would be asked to do. I'll do them occasionally, but I find that conventions are not the best place for that, because they tend to be a little bit, because you mentioned with time, and also if someone is bringing something for me to look at and they want my feedback, in order to really sort of feel like I'm giving them the amount of time and respect that they deserve for it, I actually prefer to have them, either send me stuff later through email. I'll give them my email address, or and I get a chance to actually look it over and respond one-on-one, even through Messenger or something like that. So, a one-on-one. But like, again, at the shows, I've actually also had to sort of, have people, like, especially in San Diego, at the booth, there are people who sort of are handlers and things like that.
Yeah.
But at the very least, I mean, I want to be able to have an interaction with each fan, and talk to them, because it's as much of an experience for me. It's not all, it doesn't all flow one direction. I find that I'm really interested in people like yourself. It's like, you came from where. It's like, and finding out that, I mean, it's a wonderful medium, but also what it provides is a really interesting way to meet other people who share a similar love and who also have very different lives, and to me, it's just, it speaks to the universality of it as well, which I really love. And I'm finding that more and more, the more I do. But with, there are some adjustments that need to be made, or have been made over the years. But I was talking when I was with Dave Gibbons, and I were talking, and he said to me, he goes, being a comic pro is the best kind of, quote, celebrity. He says, because in this building, everybody might know who you are, because you walk outside and nobody, it's like you can, it's like being an actor when you're first starting out. You can people watch, the idea of being Clint Eastwood and going out and being able to sort of look at people when you're the person everyone's looking at. You can't do the clandestine observation, but I'm really starting to miss conventions now more than I thought.
Oh man! Oh god! Yeah. I'm just gonna say, it's when you asked me how many I was doing. It kind of nearly brought a tear to the eye. Something we've talked about on the show before. I mean, we try and do kind of like we wanted to try and do little workshops to kind of help people get the most out of their convention. One of the things that we try and push more people to is the artist alley, and into interacting with that artists and actually meeting those people that create the books that they love. But when you talk to a lot of attendees, sometimes there is that kind of difficulty about how to approach an artist, and it's that real sense of that disconnect between an attendee and the creative on the other side, because you don't know how to approach them. I mean, what do you do to kind of break the ice with someone who is clearly intimidated by you?
Well, having been on both sides of that equation, it's like, when I was growing up, I really didn't do a whole lot of conventions, but when I did, there were, and over the years, there have been people that I've met where I've been kind of nervous to go up to them, not wanting to bother them or whatever.
That's the thing, isn't it?
Yeah, and so one of the things that I do now is that I really, if I'm at a convention, I feel like I'm there kind of as an ambassador in a way for the medium as well. So, people have kids, people have pets, people. It's like, I'm an animal lover. It's like, it's like, oh, could we take a picture with my dog? It's like, sure, of course, so, I mean, I try to keep my my interactions at least positive, and rather than dropping the F-bomb in front of 5-year-olds. It's and again, it's a way to turn off a lot of the sort of, stuff and just celebrate being, with people. But I do feel that when people come up, it's I'm really glad to see them, and I'm really glad that, thanks so much for coming, and so I'm absolutely overjoyed anytime people show up, and I don't, like I said, I don't take any of it for granted, and because these are all people who've taken, and whether they've come to the show in general, but if they've sought me out specifically, I mean, that's, when I was just a kid drawing comics, I just wanted to do the medium. I wanted to do the stories. I never really thought about all that other stuff,
Yeah.
So to me, I'm just meeting other people. And I hope that, when people meet me, it's like I'm just a guy with a weird job, So it's, if, as long as there's mutual respect, I'm good,
Fair enough. That makes sense. We've got a whole bunch of people that are joining us today, and I want to get through a number of comments through. We've got ourselves James Fletcher, who's saying, Bill, want to say thank you again to you for your kind message to me when my mother passed away. I think that's something that people really do appreciate, that you are very forthcoming certainly when it comes to Twitter and social media, that you are someone that will talk and very much interact. Let's see what else we've got here. We've got a couple of very specific questions as well. You okay with that?
Sure, I'm totally
just dive
fine.
in. We'll go in with this one. This is from David Robertson. Hi, Leonard and Bill. Any plans to write and draw another completely original project like Stray Toasters? Well, I mean, that's something that was going to jump starting off another question I was going to ask, which was about your time in lockdown and your creativity. I mean, how's it been in that regard? Is it something that's really kind of weighed on top of you, or have you actually been freed to be a bit more creative when it comes to original content?
Well, I think it's been a mix of both. I thought at first when it started to happen, when the lockdown began, I started to view it almost like, because a lot of projects that I was in the middle of, like with the New Mutants film, for example, I had just spoken with Josh Boone about a few days before everything got shut down, and I was also in the process of talking to HBO and a couple of other places about beginning work on some projects, and then I was also wrapping up, trying to address the move, and also finishing up some projects like The Question, working on that with Dennis and Jeff Lemire and Chris Sotomayor. So there were a number of ongoing projects. There were a number of new projects that were going to be coming on, and then everything just sort of stopped. So what happens is, usually around the Christmas holidays, when people start to go away and travel to for family and everything else, there's that kind of lull that occurs, and I was sort of viewing it almost in that way, like a kind of a holiday, mindset. And what by that I don't mean like celebratory. I mean everything kind of shuts down a bit.
Exactly, I know exactly what you mean.
And I can kind of just do my own thing. I don't feel any pressure, and the thing is that I'm actually feeling more pressure. I've been keeping more, busier than I thought I would be, and it certainly has inspired me to want to kind of revisit a lot of the creator-owned things that I sort of dabbled with. Part of which, what happened with Stray Toasters, is that when I did it, it was, it was 4 issues. It was fully my own thing, and I realized just how much the writing sort of took out of me, and doing the whole thing. It's sort of because I don't know if I could do a monthly in the way of like, say, a superhero book or something like that.
Sure.
Because I don't know if I'm wired. I can translate, even when I do the art, sometimes, to the frustration of publishers, if I'm working on something, I can't just bat it out just to get it done. I'll think that that's what I'm going to do. And then when I start in on it, it's whether it's just my desire to do the best job I possibly can. And even if it's something I might not have really been 100% interested in, I'll find something interesting about it so that I feel that I always end up learning something and diving into it. So there's no real expediting of things just to get stuff out of the way.
Well, it's very similar to what you were saying earlier about your interest in the European approach and the European approach of conventions, and that's very much like the European approach of comics. In that it is a case of, it's not to a very strict timetable. It's very much a case of the best work you can on a slightly bigger page as well. And really taking a time over a story and over a concept, and when you really start to get into the nuts and bolts of exploring the different concepts, and instead of just being stuck to a regimented schedule, as it were. I think that's an interesting
there is that, and also the other thing I found out is that I really have enjoyed sort of being able to jump into the line art and then into the writing. I mean, I just finished up, when I say just, I mean, it hasn't come out yet, because I think there was the anniversary of Marvel's, the Alex Ross series with Kurt Busiek, and Alex reached out to me to do some painted pages for that and to write something. So I did a 10-page. I posted one page of it, which was an image of the Watcher. So, and that really, just diving into it and doing, it allowing it to kind of grow organically as I was working on it. I really enjoyed it, and I fell in love with the medium all over again, because having done so many covers or even, the memorial pieces, which I'll do, or posters for different, or album covers or whatever, there's something very unique about comics where I find that a lot of the things that I bring to painting or whatever don't necessarily apply to the medium of comics, because it's all about telling the story. So certain images or certain ways of producing an image, it may not need all the bells and whistles and degree of finish, because that might actually slow the reader down. So it's like, in a way, learning things and relearning things that I've already learned from before, and that you just tend to forget. And hopefully you get better, but at the same time, you end up bringing a whole different level of maturity. Well, hopefully, although that ship may have sailed, I don't know, but I will say
I'm hearing that a lot from creators when it comes to lockdown, in that, I mean, certainly when the publishers just shut down, and all of a sudden a lot of people were in their own head for a period of time, and there was that kind of hearing original voices of their own. And that, I mean, I know I've said the term before, and sorry, regular listeners, and I'm going to use it again: COVID babies. There's that kind of that sense of something that's going to come from this period of hearing your own voice in lockdown.
That's a great point. That's actually a really good point. I think that as a species, I think we've seen, like, even from as far back from the 60s and that sort of spawned like the later issues of what came through, but with Denny O'Neil, rest in peace, with Neil Adams, a lot of the stuff he did with Green Lantern, Green Arrow, about sort of when the origins of this sort of climate change and dealing with drugs, et cetera, and overpopulation. So that every crisis that comes along, the arts are always a way to deal with it, whether it's musically or otherwise. And certainly for me, because I do like to jump around, one of the things that has hit me is that because it's not a question of if, it's a question of when, because I definitely want to do it. And I realized that the idea of doing Straight Toasters to me was a one-off. It was not meant to be, an ongoing kind of a thing. But but I do know that since I like playing with different styles, I even thought about doing sort of an anthology style book, or maybe either a quarterly or every month and a half or 2 months, except that I could do a 2-page pop song over here, or just do something very cartoony that's like something silent, and then another like more involved, serious, painterly kind of a story where it might be more of a concert piece as opposed to a 2-minute little interstitial over here. So the idea of and I think I feel fortunate that I have enough followers and fans who would follow me even if I go off the sort of David Lynch deep end.
I guarantee there are people screaming at the screen right now going, don't tease.
Yeah.
Don't tease
but
us.
that's and I do owe Kelly Sue yet another apology, because it's like I've not forgotten about Parisian White at all. It's like that's still something that I'd been struggling with, because I was trying to figure out how to approach it, and I've dived into it, and then I've kind of resurfaced, and it's like every attack at it feels like I'm learning something and it's defining itself. And yet the more like when I just did the job with for Alex Ross, that was a big turning point for me, because I've done so many likenesses over the last bunch of years and a lot of movie poster type stuff that that I kind of took myself in the direction of more representational work. And I really enjoy that, because I do find that I'm learning a lot. But when I was working on the Marvel story, I realized that there's also that part of me that I enjoy the cartooning aspect of things, and the distortions and the mix of realism and multimedia and an abstraction, kind of like what I did back with Electra Assassin or Daredevil. So that is, I think, in some respects, I think that this sort of thing that can happen to artists is that, you start to feel like, well, I'm a painter now, and, you nail your hand to the forehead, and it's like, I love being able to do that. But at the same time, it's like, sometimes the best things about comics is like, I'll see a lot of stuff online where everything is photo referenced. I mean, and yet I'm not going to, there's no names I'll mention, but you can always tell when something is being posed, and they're sort of like, as opposed to the John Buscema school of everybody's really kind of at the apex of their positions, whereas something that is sort of tepidly photographed, and and someone will be it ticks all the buttons in terms of academic accuracy, but in terms of storytelling accuracy, in terms of exaggeration, it's missing all of that. And
well, I mean, that's something that I was watching, because I mean, something I want to get into is also your online content as well, because I've been really enjoying the videos that you've been putting up. But Alex Ross put up a video recently, and I was stunned by how much photo reference he does. I mean, that does obviously play into his style in that photorealistic painting style, but I was stunned at how much physical photo reference. I mean, he was going through almost like a flip book of photo reference.
Yeah, and that definitely appeals to his style. But I also think in terms of who he is and what he's done in terms of his painterly work, is that I think his whole goal has been to make the characters that were hand drawn, in line art by Kirby, or the comics that he grew up with, is to to show the fabric and the fold as if these people existed in the real world. So whereas there became a big point of contention when Neil Adams started his new Batman Odyssey, and he started to show Batman's pupils, or his eyes, whereas like instead of that white slit, that were so mysterious and yet said so much. So I'll use photographs and everything else, but I do feel that there is something to be said for becoming a slave to the reference, and to me, I'm just bored with seeing. And again, I'm never ever bored with seeing what Alex does with it, because Alex may play with it. But when I say bored with it, I mean about where the idea has to come first. So if someone is pointing over there, and you've got a photograph of someone pointing, and their mouth is sort of semi-open, whereas where the emotion is really, it should be more theater. It's like it's over. The grand gesture, and that's something about comics. So if someone is in a position of speculation or introspection or something like that, it's you can really sort of do the lip biting or get something across that really takes a very mundane sort of blasé expression and takes it to the ultimate. It's like, it's sort of you can actually play with different levels of exaggeration or toning it down, and that to me is what comics can do.
Well, I think that also really plays into the styles that you represent and the styles that you put to the page as well. Because, something that has been referenced already, and we're going to bring some of them up as well. We're going to get some examples of the tribute pieces that you post, which are just absolutely stunning. But also the fact that you are known for, like you say, that really exaggerated, abstract style of work, certainly on New Mutants and on Daredevil. That the real sense that the breadth of style, I think, is what a lot of people are drawn to you for. But it's the level of craftsmanship you then apply to those, whatever style that you're going for. I think that's what people appeal to. We'll talk about them because they are just a stunning part and representation of. We'll start with the latest one, which is of Ian Holm, and these are just. I'm not going to lie. When we have the passing of someone beloved, it is obviously. There are a number of them recently which have bloody hurt. Ian Holm's one of them. Denny O'Neill's certainly one of them. But then I can't wait to see how you're going to represent them and how you're going to honor them and really kind of and show a facet to their personality in the work that you do. The piece you did of Denny is just absolutely stunning. And what I love about that piece as well is it's a young Denny. It's Denny when he, all the neurons were firing, everything was going off, and there's just so much the potential and what he was. Yeah, it's absolutely incredible. But if you could talk about these, and I hate to think how sometimes you feel when you open up your Google News browser or whatever, and the news that someone has passed. Do you because you are known for these now, is it something that you kind of feel a little pressure to do?
There have been times I have. There have been other times when, they started out really just as a way for me to, in whatever way I could, do an acknowledgement of someone who passed, who may have meant something to me personally. I've done other pieces as well, like birthday pieces or celebratory pieces.
Hang on, my personal favorite. I've got to do it because it's Betty Bloody White. I'm sorry, but it's Betty White.
She's just indestructible, But I think that what happens is that there will inevitably be somewhere in the thread of responses. Usually up at the top is I thought this person passed away. It's like, come on. It's like, and it's like, I can see why you'd think that, but that's not the case. I'd like to do something celebratory here, you know, and more as a happy birthday. But there was also a period when I started to feel a little ghoulish, you know.
Yeah.
Because you know, when I do these pieces, I mean, I'll find reference, or either I'll have my own reference of the person if I actually know them and I have photos of them, but also. What struck me was after I started doing a number of them, the responses from people started to really kind of shift my perspective a bit, because what was happening was that my goal, I mean, even though I started doing drawings and likenesses when I was a kid, my father and my uncles were all big Rat Pack guys. I mean, they all love Sinatra and you know, Peter Lawford and Dean Martin. So I would do the drawings of these guys for them, you know, because it's like you know, maybe I'd get a sip of beer out of it, you know, or something as a kid, you know. And then I also did portraits at the at local fairs with the Heart Fund, and then I would do them for. I was in high school. I would do them for like $7. And I got to, and again, it's like very similar for convention training, because I was used to having people around me critiquing my work, you know, and I was 14. And I remember there was one case where I drew this girl, she had braces on, and I finished the drawing and she burst into tears. She was really upset because the braces had sort of and I was, you know, my own abilities were sort of marginal at best. I mean, but I because the braces sort of pushed her mouth out, so she kind of had that sort of puffiness right in here.
Oh,
and I said, I tell you, and she started to cry, and she just was like, she was going to pay for the drawing, but the fact that she had gotten so upset really disturbed me. So I said, I tell you what, let me draw you smiling without the braces, like what you're going to look like when you get them off. It was my sort of like trying to think on my feet, and I ended up doing, you know, because at that time I was also into Neil Adams, and he was doing a lot of like some advertising. So I gave her like the most, you know, perfect commercial, you know, white tooth smile, you know, and advertising. And her whole demeanor, she stopped crying, she hugged me. And I realized, one, that when you do a likeness of someone, you have to try to capture how they see themselves, as opposed to doing a caricature, which is to take all of the sort of less than photogenic, you know, parts of their appearance and sort of emphasize those, whereas you want to diminish the ones when you're doing a portrait that are negative. And also I realized that what art can do in terms of impacting people, you know, that drawings, it's like when you're doing that there's an inherent weight to that. So, you know, over the years doing these pieces, I try to find something about the person that means that is like indicative of them in a certain way. Like for some reason, like I did Brian Dennehy. I mean, he's just sort of this big bearish guy, and I sort of dropped him into like shadows and made him imposing. And whereas like the one I did of Fred Willard, which was just sort of almost like, you know, this very sort of jovial, simple, almost like he's holding a balloon with his head on it, you know. And I realized that people were responding to those, you know.
We'll come back to that one. We'll come back to the picture I just put up.
But yeah, I do feel I like when I'm using the photo reference, you know, I'm not recreating the wheel or pushing out into any new territory, because, like, you know, a lot of them are really, I'm not doing anything new design wise or trying to, they're really pretty much exercises in media, but also with the intent of trying to capture who the person is. So the one of Denny, you know, that sort of simple black and white image of him just sort of being, like with Brian Dennehy here, I wanted to kind of go in a direction that felt like there's a massiveness there that, you know, that sort of came across when I think of him. So whereas like the Betty White with the birthday piece, I mean, like it's light, airy, there's colors, you know, and the likeness aspect is almost the least of it, you know, getting that and nailing it. It's the psychological aspect of the person that I'm trying to capture. And that, so having done those and done these pieces, the idea of taking the ability that I've learned and things that I've learned by doing these and translating that into using the photography, and then to go back and, you know, to what I tried doing before, is pretty exciting, because I do find that when I was doing a lot of very serious work, my sketchbooks would get very frivolous and light and cartoony. And when I was working on something that was very cartoony, my sketchbooks would get very sort of dark, you know. So in a way, it was kind of like achieving a level of equilibrium. And so to me, any of the things are, any medium, any tool you use is really to kind of get the idea across of what you're trying to convey. And for me, doing these portraits is a way of feeling connected. And there's a number of them that I have on the drawing board that I've not been able to complete yet. Certainly, like the Black Lives Matter, you know, with the almost daily police shootings. You know, there's a social aspect to all of it as well. But at the same time, there's also, like I have one I started of Little Richard, which I've, you know, yet to complete. And some of the people who pass away, I may not have known who they are. You know, Agnes Varda, the director, passed away last year sometime. And I actually, I realized that I said, this is somebody I should have known or I should know about. So what happens is, almost posthumously, I start to investigate who they were and their impact. And I'm going, like, on rare occasion, you know, I'll go, I really wish I had discovered this person while they were still around. So
it's almost like you're unearthing their personality through investigation. I think that's interesting. Yeah,
exactly.
I am going to try and get some more comments in.
Oh no, please. Absolutely.
Guys, I know I'm monopolizing Bill, but tough. It's my podcast. I don't care. But we have got a couple of comments, and I certainly want to get into some other stuff that you've done recently. But I also want to I want to go all over the place.
No, I'm certainly doing that. So please join me out here in the water.
So we got. Let's have a look. Daniel Betts, can you please pass on to Bill my great thanks for his Daredevil and Elektra work? Always brings a smile to my face. I mean, we've got a piece which I can bring up now. I'm going to also mention about the reason why I brought up that Brian Dennehy piece as well. I mean, if we just bring Daniel's comment off, I mean, yeah, it's iconic stuff. So thank you very much indeed for your comment, Daniel.
I think that one was for I think that was for the Jim Lee auction.
Yeah, it was. Well, that's where I'm going to go next in a second. Andrew Dickinson is saying, I read your wiki page and found that you are descended from the author of Quo Vadis. Any temptation to do that as a graphic novel or Sword and Fire? He's got a thing for Polish winged hussars, by all accounts.
I've thought about that. I mean, I wondered if I would either do an adaptation of you know, of some of his work, or even to sort of, you know, play around with sort of the lineage, the history of, you know, come out with something called, like, you know, Status Quo Vadis, you know, or something where I could play with the linkage, because the idea of actually having, you know, I mean, he may have, you know, Henrik may have won a Pulitzer, you know, or a Nobel. I'm sorry, but I don't think he has an Eisner. So it's like, okay, you know, it's even as far as I'm concerned. But
fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. You've got a couple of friends dropping by as well. Clydine Nee from San Diego Comic Con saying hi. Say hi. And you've also got Matt Dunford as well dropping by saying howdy, Bill.
Hey, Matt.
Considering that, it's the running joke here on this particular show that the San Diego Comic Fest is the biggest convention that San Diego has hosted this year.
It really is.
Congratulations on that one, Matt.
Well, Matt had. I mean, when I met so many people at the Comics Fest, it was the last convention I was at. And it was right. Everybody at the show had heard about COVID, so the running joke was,
would have started
do you have it? Yeah. And I think I learned 6 new ways of greeting someone without touching them, or without like handshakes. It's like, I think, of course there's the Spock, or there's this version of the hokey pokey where you just sort of like kick the insoles of each person's foot. It was, I'm surprised there wasn't some kind of dance associated with it as well,
yeah, well, yeah.
It's a great show.
Just to say the elbow touch.
That's right, or the fist bump. But for people who don't know about the Comic Fest, it's a really wonderful show. I mean, it's sort of, I'm not saying it just because Matt was just on here, but it's like San Diego, all of the pluses of San Diego with none of the negatives.
I've also been told it's San Diego Comic-Con in a time warp. It's very much how that nucleus and how it started.
That's very true. Yeah. Well, because you said the first year you went was what, 2011?
Mine was 2010. I know I'm a relative noob on this one. I get it.
Oh well, I mean, I was going for years, and like for me, I remember when it was when it was at the El Cortez.
Right.
Yeah.
Someone else has mentioned that, and I might as well tell you now because before you start with your story, I've stayed at the El Cortez, because it's now a bunch of very nice apartments. I have been told by several people it certainly doesn't look like it did when the convention was there. But even I mean, I've heard the stories, and they've got lots of bits and pieces in the lobby as well, mementos of its visit at San Diego there, and you go to the ballroom and you can literally throw a ball and it'll just bounce off the room and come back to you in like seconds. It's so small and intimate, and you hear the stories of Jack Kirby disappearing from his table, going off, and So I mean, I'm ready for this story. Away you go. Away you go.
Amazing. Well, no, I mean, it's like I remember the first time that I was in the pool, and I mean, you could fit the entire professional contingent and all the fans in one building. From Harlan Ellison, like meeting him and Ray Bradbury to like the sort of very sort of upsetting bits. I remember the very first time I'd ever seen Wally Wood was at that in that building, and in a weird way, it was almost like because at the time I was also a pretty heavy drinker myself, but I saw these 3 men coming toward me, and 2 on the outside were holding the guy in the middle, sort of like he was almost like a limp scarecrow. And as they're walking past the guy in the middle, his feet were just dragging on the ground, and that was Wally. Because I guess Wally, had a fascinating life, but the humanity that we all have in terms of sometimes we're going down our darker paths, but that has always stayed with me. So you meet people under some of the best conditions and circumstances, then you meet in smaller settings. Sometimes they leave a more lasting impact. And even at some of the later convention centers, there was one where it was almost like a kind of yard sale is what it felt like a mix of tailgating parties and yard sale, where people were sort of having like, all the boxes out. And I remember sitting with, oh God, who wrote "Kick the Can"? Clive, the writer.
The Twilight Zone story.
Yeah. He was there with his wife and daughter, and we were sitting like near each other. And I'm blanking on his name right now, which is not
Thing is, I think I'm going for the writer who did the film version, and it's not him.
But no, it was just literally like sitting next to people and just sort of hanging out. There wasn't this functional kind of corporatization to any of it.
Gotcha.
At the time, you could be standing by the exit doors, which was really sort of like something you'd see in a regular gymnasium, with the bar that you push, and somebody would bop outside for a cigarette, and then they'd pound on the door, and you just open it, and they'd come back in. You can't do that at the convention now if you can even smoke. I mean, so through the years and the iterations, it's become this monstrosity where I literally think they're holding, the convention. If anything, I wonder if they're, because they keep trying to add on to the convention center.
Sure.
And I'm wondering if how many zip codes are going to go through, or area codes. But there have been a couple of years where I thought I almost don't want to go. It's like I've been there. It's like I could use a break, from it. But now, certainly not now. Now I'd actually dive at it.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
I mean, like when we've had a couple of guests on, and when they talk about, can we have some way of scaling back San Diego Comic-Con? Can we have it back to some of those golden days of having them at the El Cortez? And I'm going, okay, I stayed there a couple of years on the trot. My leg calf muscles, because it's right at the top of that hill.
Yes.
You'd think twice about making that scale. So making that trek up that hill.
Of course, even when you were going for the very first time, the first times that I went there, back when I think it was like myself, Mignola, Arthur Adams, and a bunch of people. I mean, we would go out in the evenings and go, to any local food shop that was out there. But that whole area was primarily just like naval stuff. There was a Greyhound depot there. It was a dodgy area to go into, and they've gotten rid of all of that. The gas lamp district, that's been created relatively, in a relatively short time in terms of what it's become. But when you said you were going to, when you talked about going to San Diego in the past, and all those years ago, it was a little bit like, a 50-50 chance, whether you were actually going to make it to the show or make it, make it into a stall somewhere with a knife in your throat,
It certainly wasn't the glittering city by the bay.
Absolutely not. So for all those people who say, can we scale it back? It's like, it depends on, if you have to scale it back, it's like, well, fine, but you have to scale it back knowing full well that you can't just scale back the bad stuff. It's like, if you're going to scale it back, just take the good with the bad. It's like, but it's not going to happen. Obviously, it's, certainly not under the current way things are going,
Sure. Mark Gage is saying, I remember you when you were the hotshot superstar back in 1982. You were a rock star, and he has seen you a few times since. So you have some long-term fans in the room.
I had the mullet. I had the mullet to prove it. So.
Into the Blue Mister. 3 times I've been to San Diego Comic-Con. 3 times I've made the 5,000-mile pilgrimage just to get a book signed, and 3 times I've missed him. I'm starting to think he's hiding under his table. No.
Well, if I'm not hiding, I'm probably sleeping, because but that's unfortunate. Now it's like I have to meet you. It's like we're gonna figure. Once all of this stuff goes, it's like, you tell him, that whoever
it was into the Blue Mystery, absolutely.
Yeah. But we'll figure it out, because unless we can either do one of two things. We can stop this, nip it in the bud right now, and we meet, or we keep it going. It's like now there's no
yeah.
Fourth time's the charm,
Yeah. I mean, the person I queued up 3 times and missed out on every single time, unfortunately, I'm not going to meet now, and that's Stan Lee, unfortunately. But the one person that I absolutely was determined to camp out for, I ended up camping outside of the Hard Rock Hotel for 5 hours as the sun arced over. and absolutely sunburnt me into the ground. So
Oh,
I met one of my favorite artists looking like a lobster. So yeah, that was
oh.
slightly embarrassing, but there we go. That
Well,
was true.
San Diego does have a a copious amount of sunlight. That is, I mean, on my Facebook page, Carl Potts, who was one of the editors that I worked with at Marvel, and the late great Mark Grunwald. I mean, we just posted some images of the three of us jet skiing in San Diego back when you go on Marvel's dime, no less. I mean, they paid for the jet skis, they paid for the cars. I mean, I remember I was dressed as Spider-Man because I was a freelancer, and Shooter asked if they would pay all of my expenses if I would dress up as Spider-Man for the entertainment we were doing, or the video we were shooting at the San Diego Zoo, where they had just opened up their penguin exhibit, and all the Marvel editors were all dressed up in tuxedos. So to sort of echo that, and I was basically
I've got to see
Spider-Man.
those photos.
Yeah,
I've got to see those.
yeah. Shooter has made several like online comments about the whole thing. It was really quite an experience. So yeah, so that was so if he saw me under the table sleep, hiding, it's like, no, I probably was like trying to like apply muscle bomb, to get rid of the aches and pains of jumping around on everything from walls to to different park benches at San Diego. So
The things you have to do as a comic artist. Good
yeah,
grief.
that's
Oh,
exactly.
yeah,
Everybody
absolutely.
thinks it's just nothing but sitting behind a desk, drinking, 1 foot in hot water, 1 foot in cold water, so you don't fall asleep, and a mix of coffee and alcohol, and an ashtray full of cigarettes, that's sort of the default.
Is
But
that what it is?
I'm referencing it back about 30 years. So
Yeah, I thought
yeah.
I suspected as much.
Yeah, right.
Tina Gann, Bill, still hoping that you'll get invited to Singapore Comic Con. Yeah, I think there's. I mean, we've got a couple of convention organizers that would love to have you at their show. We've got Mark.
Tina, yes.
Saying,
I would love to do that.
Yes. Yeah, Bill is more than welcome at MacPow next year, but would need a whip round to cover his plane ride. When you're talking small conventions, this is in a small town called Macclesfield in the north of England. You would be very welcome at that particular show. Safe to say.
Now, how far below Scotland, the Scotland line, is it?
A good couple hundred miles.
Okay.
It's in the middle of the country. And
okay. Yeah.
There we go.
Well, I remember when I was with my good friend Mike Lake, and I had been touring from Edinburgh to Glasgow, Manchester, Leeds, all the way down through to London, and for Electra Assassin. And I remember when I at that point I think I was already divorced. I was actually in Scotland, and I was completely clean of every like vice. By the time I got down to London, I had taken up every vice I'd gotten rid of. It's like, it was still one of my favorite signing trips of ever, But luckily, that's like it was in the days prior to everybody having a camera phone, so I'm pretty much sure I'm safe.
Yeah. I mean, you've got Nick Marshall. Is there any chance of you coming over to the UK? I mean, I think that kind of will kind of feeds back to those questions we asked right at the top of the show, which was about what we could expect the new normal to be for conventions. What would it take to get you on a plane at the moment?
At the moment,
yeah.
I'm having conversation with a couple of people about that. Well, one, it's my biggest priority right now is to move into the and even once I get in there, I'm not going to just drop everything and go on a plane. It's sure. Like I need to kind of like settle in and get things sort of settled. So I probably couldn't see even getting anywhere until like toward the end of the year. I think I need to sort of settle in. So
so you feel you'd be comfortable at that short period of time? I mean,
well, I can't see flying anywhere, even though they've opened up the airspace somewhat to some extent. You know, they're saying that you can start flying probably in August or something. I don't foresee that happening. I'm going to wait until until it's considerably safer. You know,
I mean, the general consensus is when we have our audience is usually saying the word vaccine. The moment a vaccine is found, then maybe some people could be a little bit more comfortable.
Yeah, exactly. But I don't know what kind of speculation there is in terms of a time frame for that.
I have no idea. No idea. I mean, we've got Into the Blue Mister again. I think, we would love to have you at Thought Bubble. We'd love to have you back.
I would love to. I would love to. That, again, is not a question of if, but it's absolutely just merely a question of when. So, and so everybody, it's like, take care of yourselves. I'll do the same, and we'll see each other there. So.
Fair enough. What I want to talk about is, we've talked about the tribute posts that you've been putting up, but I definitely want to bring this up because this has been one of the most worthwhile things that we've seen as part of the pandemic. The sense of community coming together, not only for, like I say, Black Lives Matter, but also for the comics community and retailers. This is the piece we've got on screen at the moment, which you did
for
Jim Lee, which, I mean, if we just go a little bit further in on that, I mean, this was it is still an ongoing effort by Jim to raise this money, which is
he's really
phenomenal.
He's just amazing. Really, he's knocked it out of the park. I mean, not only has he been just like crushing it financially in terms of bringing the money in for people, but people are getting some absolutely exquisite pieces as well.
It's when he turned around in the first week or so and he said, "These are sketches. These are pieces I'm going to do 2 or 3 hours a day, maybe even half an hour, just something I can put to put out into the world." And then it got to about literally 2 weeks in, and they're like masterworks, and he's spending 5-6 hours on them a day. And I'm going, okay, that's your day, sir. Congratulations. You've just set yourself a bar so high.
Yes.
How on earth?
It really is. Well, that's often how those kinds of things start, when you want to do something, like, even when I mentioned, like when you mentioned about the memorial pieces, when I first started them, I mean, they were like simple black and white drawings, and since there's no real pressure, I'm quote just doing sketches, as Jim said, and then you start to find yourself kind of going deeper and deeper and spending more and more time on quote a sketch, and but if you had said from the outgo, I'm going to do these 5-hour masterpieces or whatever, it's you'd probably just go, I think I'm not even going to go anywhere near this. It's a funny way how we sort of trip ourselves into letting some pressure off, and then we end up just descending further. So I mean, even his sketches are phenomenal. And when he approached me, and he and Dave Mandel approached me about contributing a piece. I mean, that's one of the things that I wish I had more time to do. Is I think I did 2 pieces for Jim, the Electra, and I think there's 2 more on my board that that are probably going to be used for some other. Well,
I mean, that was what I was going to ask about, because I mean, it was, and it is, like I say, still an amazing fundraising effort for the retailers. But something that we brought up when the pandemic kicked in, and we took this show twice a week to become kind of like a community corkboard, as it were, for the convention community. When everyone was kind of marshalling behind the retailers, I was wondering when we were going to start seeing a second effort for the actual creatives, because there is still no union, there's still no support system for a lot of creators. Can you see perhaps a very similar effort happening for those artists that have really struggled throughout lockdown?
I would like to see that. I mean, it's a shame that I feel that the situation is here, and again, I'm only speaking of the United States. It's sad that specifically as it relates to comics, that there is no retirement, there is no gold watch, you know.
It's almost work till you drop.
That's that's it. And unfortunately, because of the way the corporate things are structured on a corporate level, it's like, and there's, I'm not maligning it at all or bad mouthing. It is what it is. But there's a little bit like that, and I've seen this with certainly, you know, some of my idols, my heroes like Jim Aparo, or even John Buscema, Nick Cardy, you know, Carmine, you know, people that I revered growing up, that I've had the pleasure of working with and working over on terms of the inking part. But part of the corporate structure is that they pay it enough to keep you on that treadmill, you know, where you're kind of the hamster on the wheel, and God forbid anything happens to anybody and they get a little bit behind. I mean, there are outlets like Hero Initiative, which is great for helping struggling creators, but the downside of all of that is that we're actually in a position where we need to actually do a GoFundMe or do some kind of charity to actually help these people who have given so much of their lifeblood.
Sure.
You know, I remember I became very close with the great Nick Cardy, just an absolutely sweet guy, you know, man. And he, his style had sort of just fallen out of favor with the executives. And I was like, look, you've got to, I would kill to ink him on a series, you know? So whether or not that actually happens for, you know, for the creators, the point is that I think as a business, certainly the shops are, you know, they've done so much for what, you know, allows comics access to so many people. But we could almost have, you know, a multi-pronged approach. I mean,
sure.
The creators themselves. I just spoke to a friend of mine, a creator, who just had some serious surgery, you know, and it's sort of like the recovery process is in place. And, you know, the insurance aspect of things, it's to me, it speaks not just of the situation under COVID, but it speaks to a much larger kind of issue.
True.
You know?
Well, I mean, we've been a big supporter here of the fundraising efforts for Tess Fowler, who's an incredible artist. She's going through treatment for cancer at the moment, and she's had to have a GoFundMe just to kind of to get through the situation. I mean, then again, I think that this is also not just talking comics. This is a broader conversation.
Well, absolutely, but I certainly do wish Tess the best. I mean, you know, the benefit sometimes of social media is that it keeps people informed about, like, some of the most wonderful things, some of the darkest things, and certainly there's more mundane idiocy out there, you know. And I didn't know about Tess until you mentioned it right now, and so I mean, you know,
I think also the fact that you kind of you learn where your friends are, and that the people will come when called, when a clarion call goes out. I think.
Well, that's that's good, because I mean I think she's so incredibly talented. So when we're done here, I can get some info on the GoFundMe or something for her. Yeah,
sure. I mean, personally, I think also the things that you've put out into social media has helped and benefited so many people, especially when it comes to alleviating a lot of stresses and pressures, considering that we have had the likes of this going up on line.
Yes.
If you can, please talk about this briefly before we move on. Bill, what happened?
I'll be damned if I know. It's like, you know, on advice of my attorney, I think It was a Throwback Thursday photo. I think I just literally, it was a little bit of a shot across the bow of my buddy Dan Panosian, Mr. James Bond himself, and it was like, because most of the people that I know in comics, especially a lot of we all tend to sort of give each other, the what for, we can bust each other's chops. So there was a great fraternal and otherwise kind of friendship that develops. We're all in this as a family. But when I posted that image, I was looking through different images, and I thought, I have reference photos of say Dennis Cowan and I posing for Jimi Hendrix, like that's a throwback image. And for some reason, I found, I was scrolling through and I found that image, which I posed for myself, but as the character, the Black Widow, is for a cover. And so, like taking a page from the Robert Fawcett School, where he posed for everybody, regardless of age or gender, So when I posted that, I think I don't know if alcohol was involved. Probably not. I think it was probably just poor judgment on its own. But when I posted it, I think it was the first person to dive into it and say, we got to run with this, was Mike Oeming.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, and then Darlie Brewster came in, and then a number of other people. Darlie did 2 amazing pieces, and then it was kind of off to the races. And I think we're close to 300 or something like that now, if not more.
I mean, when I say that we could see a second effort for a fundraising effort, those sketches alone as a
well, that's something that is definitely there. We are in discussions right now with people about doing a publishing venture for that, and actually having nice. A good portion of that go to helping. So cool. It's pardon my the fact that my butt has been out there for for ridicule, and for it's like I feel like if people are going to take the time to do something, it's like I need to be up my my tolerance for I could take the piss out of myself better than anybody. So
well, I mean, it's nice to see that there are so many sketches of your backside online right now,
and some of them are really absolutely brilliant, and just where people have gone with it, it's just
yes,
some of them have been really absolutely surreal. It's just phenomenal. Cool. So I enjoy it. It's not anything what I'd expected. It sort of assumed I felt like I just became like another observer.
Yeah. I've got a bunch of questions, but I'm to try and go. There's so much.
No, let's go, because I know that I'm probably giving like longer, like more convoluted answers. So we
have no problem with that. Well, I mean, okay, this kind of reflects to that. Then this is more about your artwork, obviously. Andrew Dixon asking, do you have problems stopping, or when you have that moment to sit back and say, I'm done? Into the Blue Mister kind of follows up with that, saying it's a great question. I've often watched videos of Bill sketching and think, okay, he's done. And then 5 minutes later, okay, now he's done. And then half an hour later, okay, Bill, seriously, stop now. What is that moment when you just go, okay, I can just step and that's done?
It's gotten a little bit better over the years, but there's that running joke, that classic joke of, there's 2 of them. First is what the first 10 minutes you're working on anything, you're creating art. The rest of the time you're just trying to save it. And then the other is the way when a piece is done is to have somebody stand behind you with a hammer, And I've gotten better over the years. Certainly with the advent of digital, where you can do a Command Z or an undo and kind of save it. I've ruined more pieces, or have gone one step too far and go, I should have stopped. And so the trick is to walk right up to that line, because the last thing you want to do is stop when it's safe, as opposed to when it's like, one bit more, and it'll be the camel's back, you know,
Yeah.
that gets broken. But that's just trusting your gut at a certain point. And other times it really comes down to setting a piece aside and jumping on something else that needs to be addressed, and then looking back at the piece and going, oh, I had all these plans to run with, and it's like, no, that's done. I think it doesn't need anything else.
Being regiment, almost not regimented with your time, but having that time management in place, I think.
Yeah, well, that's a very kind way of saying, you know, like having a lot of plates that are spinning. It's you know, because I do find that if I'm working on, you know, if I'm inking Dennis Cowan and I've got a movie poster to do or a portrait to do, it's different gears. So, and yet they're all sort of related to a similar kind of approach, but you know, because drawing all day or all night can be fun, but working on the same style or the same project, if I go and I walk away and I'm all of a sudden I'm airbrushing or I'm painting, it's a even though I'm still drawing, I'm actually looking at the new piece with a whole different set of eyes.
Right.
You know, so I can come back to it. But yeah, I wish I did have that mechanism down where, you know, and there have been pieces that I've done where I go, I'm giving myself this much time. And like,
yeah,
I set the timer, and it's like, regardless of where it is, it's like, ding, okay, you know, and I'll still occasionally, like, you know,
it's the old George Lucas quote, films aren't completed, they're released.
Yeah. They're abandoned in like at an interesting place, so to speak, you know, hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure to have big numbers coming up on a number of recent episodes of this podcast, including Paul Jenkins rocking out that cover piece, ripping it off his wall, which I think I sent you the picture of it, and it was just
I'd love to see that original again, because that was one of my favorite ones I did. It was my you know, sort of playing with real 3D multimedia type stuff. It was one of my favorite pieces, and I didn't realize that Paul had it, you know, but I could have probably could have just asked if he had any idea, you know.
I was going to ask,
and it also went for a good.
Go on.
No, I'm done.
Well, I mean, I was going to ask, do you know what happened to the pieces? I mean, were they donated to families? Were a number of them still in your collection? I mean, because I know I've seen Jimmy Palmiotti's rocked up a couple of originals as well.
Right. Yeah, I think when that whole when Big Numbers sort of went sideways, I think that there were some pieces I think that were all, I think everything on Big Numbers was purchased by Kevin Eastman.
Right.
So, and I think since Paul
that man's
worked
collection.
Yeah. What's that?
That man's collection.
Yeah. Some of the pieces he had, you know, and then I think what happened was I think he ended up letting go of a lot of pieces, and you know, auctioning some off and just selling some outright. And I think Paul ended up with a few, and I think that other ones that became available online, I think, you know, like Jimmy and others, you know, probably found them through either heritage or through personal, you know, people who had them in their collection. So I think the one piece that I think I kept that I had was the one that was made into the T-shirt. It was done as a poster, and that one I gave as the wedding gift to the woman who was the model for the main character.
Nice.
So I think it's on, you know, if she's still married, her husband was in the military, so she was going to be posing. I went to her wedding, gave her the gift, and then I said, look, when you get back from your honeymoon, we need to start shooting photos for the next issue. And she said, I'm leaving. I'm moving to Germany, you know, which was a little, I felt a little betrayed. It was like, look, getting married is okay, but leaving me to go, like, you know, live in Germany. It's like, you know, but your mom, you're the main character, you know.
You can't trust models, man. You can't trust models.
You can't, absolutely not.
I mean, with Big Numbers, what is your ultimate take on that project looking back now? I mean, do you look back on it with satisfaction on what you actually achieved, or is it just pure frustration about how it ended?
It's a multitude of feelings. I mean, technically, I feel like I'd set up a very high bar in terms of what I wanted to accomplish. And this is all pre-digital.
Yeah.
So, you know, there was no blur tool in Photoshop, you know, at the time. It was like, so if I wanted something to be out of focus, I wanted to do something as completely realistic. And then it was gradually going to become a full color, you know, series as it went on.
Yeah.
So I'm very proud of the work that I did. And also really sort of, I don't really have a lot of regrets in this, you know, world. I mean, certainly in my career, but that's certainly up there, you know,
Yeah.
in terms of wishing it had not gone the way that it did. At the same time, and I've said this at other outlets, that I do feel that what Big Numbers became, because it was about chaos and about, you know, the butterfly effect in a weird way, on a meta level, the fact that Big Numbers fell apart through chaos and life, I've used this analogy before. It's sort of like the Terry Gilliam film Lost in La Mancha, where all the efforts he made trying to get Don Quixote on the screen, and that it was like talking about tilting at windmills, you know, that he was going through. I felt that Big Numbers, the fact that Big Numbers wasn't completed, for the fact that it was those 3 issues or 4 issues that I did, 3 issues, and then I think it was going to be taken over, and then it all sort of went by the wayside, and most everything ended up in Jerusalem in the Alan Moore series, but story. But the fact that it sort of, because of all of these particular circumstances that came about, in a weird way, I think that that is pretty much the encapsulation of what Big Numbers is. Maybe I'm just working really hard.
The story of Big Numbers became the story of Big Numbers. I think it's one of those. I know this is going to sound strange, so let me explain it. It's one of those true untold stories, and a real book of it could be made. But I know not just of Big Numbers, but of the story of Big Numbers, like you say.
Well, that's exactly right. As a matter of fact, that you mentioned that, the you know, dear friend of myself and so many people, John Schnepp, who passed away, you know, from several years ago, 2 years ago.
My first ever interview.
Yeah. Well,
my first ever live interview. My first live interview was at San Diego Comic Con with John Schnepp.
What an amazing
what a bloke.
Well, he actually interviewed me at least 2 hours for a documentary. And we were going to pick it up and continue because we had a backer for it, and when they approached me to do it. And then, you know, again, in a weird way, I mean, you know, John's passing as part of you know, because there's 2 hours of documentary footage out there that the people who started, you know, wanted to do it and continue it, I don't know where they are at all. So I have no idea. So it's one more factor in the mix.
I've got a couple of emails I've got to make once we're finished here. I've got some people to chase up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the only thing I know for certain is that we shot the video in LA, and I do know that whoever it was that bought Complex magazine, which I guess is sort of one of those, you know, I don't know if it's still being done now. The magazine still comes out, but I think whoever had that, you know, who held the title or the ownership of that magazine, were the people involved. So you know, so if that's not an indictment or anything else. So it's like in terms of information, in terms of possible an avenue to explore, you know, to hopefully maybe get this out there.
That would be really cool. Couple of comments, questions coming in into the Blue Mister. Last question, honestly, don't believe that at all. I mentioned earlier I've got all of Bill's convention sketchbooks. Even though there are no cons for the foreseeable future, will we get a new one this year? That's a good question.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, that's something that Sal and I and are talking about. So yeah, we've got. I think there's going to be a portal or whatever. I think we're going to have our own thing, our own sort of separate little portal. But we're going to have a bunch of new stuff, things that I've been working on over the years. We're going to try to, because most of the problem with original art sales is that, you have a booth set up, people come by and they like to see things not just on a computer screen. So how can we provide as much of the real, real life experience, but yet in terms of interaction, because it's very different to get in, on looking at something on screen as opposed to holding a piece in your hand or seeing it on a wall, just strictly for the original art aspect of it. But there will be a sketchbook. Good.
That's what we like to hear. Okay, well, I'll get one question here, and then I've got loads, but we'll get as many as we can. Daniel Betts is asking, maybe a stupid question. There is no such thing as a stupid question, sir. Never such thing. What was the best thing about working with Claremont and Miller on various comic titles, for example, X-Men and Daredevil?
Well, I mean, I could be general and say the best thing was working with my friends, my buddies on really unique characters. And to me, the best thing is that they're the epitome of collaborative, but yet in two completely different ways. I mean, I've been really fortunate to work with some of the best writers and collaborators and friends. So yeah, with Chris, it's just when we did the revisiting of the New Mutants last year for the final story of kind of culminating our run that was back in the 1980s. Chris and I got on the phone and we had this 10-minute discussion about how to approach it. And then all of a sudden it was like time ceased to exist. We were back just talking about the characters and about the kids, and realized that it was just about telling the story. So any of the plans I had about how I wanted to approach it took to just telling the story and not pushing out into new areas and trying to confuse anybody, but in a weird way provide a familiar territory. It's like a logical next step, so that people who remembered the older stuff could come into it and see it as in the same vein, and yet other people who had no idea about it at the time and sort of became fans of the work later could see it as a brand new project. So, and the same with Frank. I mean, Frank and I, we would just constantly challenge each other. I mean, we were just literally back and forth. And with Frank, certainly, I mean, with Elektra Assassin, we had some of the most hilarious, interactions and times together, because it was we just enjoyed what we were doing. And just the fact that he would write something, I would take it and it would go into my screwed up head, and just, it would be like this synaptic kind of chaos. And then I would come back with all the things that had impacted me in terms of the story, to tell the story, but do it in a very unique way, or my own way. And then Frank would go and rewrite.
I'm really curious as to what that relationship was like with working with Frank. I'd really love to know what his scripts were like for yourself, because I mean, the man's a phenomenal artist in his own right. He knows how to compose a story, but he wants to let you fly. He wants to let you have your creative input as well. I'm really curious to what that collaborative effort was like, knowing that he could put pen to paper. And
he can. Well, I think that's also the plus. It's sort of like a director who's also acted. He knows what the actors have gone through, so he knows how much or how little you need. Because the last thing I like, and that's why when I worked with Chris, I prefer working from plots where it's,
Right. Okay.
so, and then, to bring, big numbers into it, Alan's work is so dense that, the, that the idea of running with something, as I normally do, wasn't really an option on, say, big numbers with Alan, because the story was so very much specific about what he was doing. And so, I couldn't go off and do, goofy kinds of digressions. Even though he said, look, if you want to run with it, go right ahead and do that, but I felt like it would have to be for a reason if I'm going to do that. And yet I was also so much in awe of what he was doing. And I felt like my job was to simply tell the story, that specific story. So my natural inclination, like when I was working with Frank, when the very first issue of Electra Assassin, Frank's script was pretty dense, and there was a lot of gravitas to what he was writing, because his stuff was very grim, at the time, especially after Dark Knight. And my own mechanism for how I grew up was that my art was also a way of playing counterpoint. So if something was very heavy, my own innate dark sense of humor would come into it. So I found that what Frank was writing, like, say, about the opening of Electra where her father gets killed, I thought it might be interesting to sort of show it from the point of view of her as a kind of like this cartoon childlike drawing of her inside her mom's belly, and it was just, and none of that was in there, but it was, in terms of the script. But I felt the last thing I wanted to do was sort of have the words say that one thing and then the picture say exactly the same thing. Yeah. So it was my way of trying to provide a counterpoint, so that the words could be very, very heavy, but the images could be light, and vice versa. But
what was the reaction when you told him that?
Well, I didn't tell him. I just showed it. I just turned in the pages. It was like, because I at that point I had no idea what I was going to do. All I knew is that as I was doing it, it just seemed the right way to do it, or the way that I needed to do it. I can't say that there was any great plan of like, oh, I'm going to do this and try some new stuff, or try to upset the apple cart, or to do something edgy. There was no cynical kind of game plan about, like, over the years, I've had a number of different publishers come to me and they'll say, we really want to do something bold and innovative. And I go, if you're saying that, you're already in the hole, because it's like you can't plan. It's like,
it's a hiding to nothing, and two, it also doesn't mean a great deal. You can't.
Well, exactly. Yeah. It's like, it's sort of, look, we all know the Beatles could sort of sit down and write a swimming pool, as they said, it's like, but if they were going to do any song or whatever, they never, I mean, I think like Robert Plant and Jimmy Page probably knew that Stairway to Heaven was a good song, but I don't think they realized it was going to be, the bane of their existence. Certainly for Plant's, that Bloody Wedding song. So I don't think that when you plan on something, it, like the old idea of, well, if you want to hear God laugh, tell him your plans.
Yeah.
When I was working on Electra, and even the Love and War, that was really my which actually came first. Love and War came first because it was actually going to be a couple of issues in the regular run. Then Shooter saw the pages and said, do it as a graphic novel. And so I got a chance to play with color and like very much animation style. Like Kingpin became this big hulking creature, and
which must have been interesting to watch on Spider-Verse. When
that must have been a
little surreal.
It was, yeah, and luckily I saw the film by myself, even though I had been invited to some of the screenings. I didn't even know they were using my version until they called me up to do a poster. So when they invited me to some of the premiere, the showings, at that time was actually too busy to get out. And but I found like I went to a theater like late one night and by myself, because I'm just gonna go. I'm not gonna like bring a couple of people with me, because I don't want to, like, it's like I just need to get it in there, get it, it's like watch it and then leave and get back to it. Almost like I was playing hooky from the, like, you know, from the rest of what I needed to do. And I'm glad I went by myself, because I was just like mouth agape and just sort of like, you know, wiping a couple of like errant tears away from my eyes, just sort of like, wow. But at the time, we didn't think it was going to mean anything in terms of like any kind of cultural or sustaining impact. Yeah. I was even asked this during the second season premiere of Legion, where the reporter asked me what my thoughts were about how well received and critically acclaimed the series was.
That's one of my questions.
Yeah. Well, but I said, you know, he goes, what are your thoughts about that? I said, I'm still amazed they let us do the comic. It's like I'm way behind back there, kind of going like, the fact that we're here now at like in the, like there's a like a red carpet, and that there's Dan Stevens and Noah Hawley and oh God, I'm blanking on her name.
It's my favorite, Aubrey Plaza.
No, Aubrey, there we go. Of course, yes.
It is no hyperbole. It's my favorite TV show of the last 10 years.
It's really spectacular, isn't it? Yeah, yeah.
Love it.
It's really it's just brilliant. And you know, and you know, I've gotten to become quite good friends with Navid, who is just phenomenal as a person and as a talent. But the idea that you're watching whatever we did, Chris and I did, sort of translated in by other artists and creative people into something else. It's that concept of that Jasper Johns plussing of something, of just taking it and running with it and doing something to it. And then it in essence kind of circles back and inspires me. So it shows sort of the universality of creativity, and it's all cyclical, you know.
Yeah.
If you don't cut yourself off or shut yourself off from the level of impact. So yeah, I think that you know, working with Frank and with Chris, and then playing with each other's, you know, approaches, and allowing for the point and counterpoint. Because the one thing I will say, whether it's Alan or Chris or Doug or Frank, is that the story is really everything. It's like everything else that sort of goes into the mix about how to approach it and everything else, that I certainly feel that the story tells me, in my case, how it wants to be done. And that's sort of what I'm still struggling with Parisian White is, you know, I keep trying to, you know, assert my will over it. And it's just going, no, it doesn't want to be that. Yeah. So, but yeah, it's a pretty fascinating, you know, collaborative thing, and that's one of the things that comics has. That
I mean, it's a question I always want to ask Frank Whiteley. It's a question I always want to ask. Well, anyone who's worked with the likes of Neil Gaiman, with the likes of oh, good grief. Mind is blanks on me. Grant Morrison. I mean, when you see the scripts that they do, and they've clearly touching on so many reference points and so much intellectual property, and they're going into some real deep stuff. I know the question, and I know for a fact that if I ask it, I'm going to get slapped. Do you, basically, as an artist, do you have to be as intelligent as a writer? Do you have to kind of keep up with the mental processes that they're firing on? Because I can imagine even Frank Whiteley could be looking at a Grant Morrison script and going, okay, I've got to do some reading.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, speaking of Grant, there was a story that he had done that was going to be in one of the later issues of Heavy Metal that I have that I'm actually, I did the layouts for it, and it's a very kind of unusual story that at some point I'm assuming, we'll get it out there, but I'll work on it with all my copious spare time. But yeah, there is that, and I felt that way with Alan. Certainly in terms of the complexity, but I love artists, and I mean, I love the art the challenge of sort of someone like having you up your game.
Yeah.
And because it's almost requisite, and if to be part of it, to be part of, like, maybe not echoing or mirroring what the the writer's doing, but certainly bringing something, hopefully on a similar level of, even though they might not necessarily overlap in terms of a Venn diagram, but maybe they're like two equal things that the third, where they touch, that tangent will be something unusual, because there's the words and the pictures, and the combination of the two is another entity entirely. But yeah, that's a good question. I was working with
so interesting
Frank,
way of putting it. That's so interesting way of putting it.
Yeah. Well, with Frank, I mean, real quick, just when you mentioned Neil, I mean, when I worked with him, when Neil and I became friends, I mean, years and years ago, we had actually wanted to work together on some story that had to do with obsession, and we didn't happen because obviously Neil took over on Sandman, and of course just ran with other creative avenues that he went in. But when I finally worked with him on the Delirium story, he gave me kind of a general idea of what he wanted, and then I went in and do what I do, which is kind of go off on a jazz tangent. And then he came back in and sort of herded all the cats to make it a cohesive story, to the point where he actually did something Frank hadn't done, because Frank would take my pages and rewrite what Neil had done.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because it was like he realized in certain ways that maybe he didn't need to have any captions here, or maybe he's going.
That is jazz then. That's
yeah.
Pure
No, to me it's very much jazz, and but again with the purpose, because what Neil did, he actually took pages I had rejected and wanted to see everything I had done, and then he ended up not only rewriting, but jostling the pages around and reordering them, and then adding his work on top, and it became its own thing. So as much as he may have been cursing me, for throwing things at him the way that I did, in a way, there is something about the jazz aspect of it that is, I mean, it's like he herded all those cats, and some of them were, literally, scat singing, and some of them were playing harmonica, and some were, were doing a mean piano, but other ones were just sort of, how are you going to pull this together? But
yeah,
it is what it is. And I love that. That's the one thing about the collaborative medium of comics that is a plus that you don't see, say, in large productions of TV or cinema, where you can have two people. You don't need an entire group.
Well, we'll kind of dovetail into something there then, but just quickly, I will note, usually when I started off this season, I wanted to keep all the episodes to a tight hour. We're now at 2 hours 10. And I don't want to keep you away from your board, or I don't want to keep you away from the rest of your day. So I will say we'll have an end to this. We'll definitely, because otherwise, trust me, I could just keep going all day. I have no problem with that. But I don't want to keep you from the rest of the day. But I do have some questions, just a couple to wrap things up on.
Okay.
I mean, very quickly as well, with a couple of comments. Into the Blue, Mister. When I saw Bill's version of the Kingpin in the Spider-Verse movie, I wanted to jump up and down and shout to the other people in the theater, "Oh my God, do you know where that comes from?" I am with you on that one. I totally get it. Totally get it. Talking about that collaborative effort then with other media and with New Mutants. And we have to talk about it because it's been a long time coming. I'm certain you are as frustrated as the rest of us. We want to see this out on the screen. And I've loved hearing you being the uncle to the cast, which is just brilliant. Almost ready to walk in front of gunfire for them over the criticism that people have had about wanting to see this out, what tone it's going to be. It must have been so frustrating to see how the frustration has been treated from the top brass, almost shunted down the pole at every turn. I mean, can you talk about what your thoughts are on New Mutants?
Well, I mean, it's sort of, you know, having been part of it and yet also kind of removed as a kind of a visitor to the, you know, because I do totally respect what Josh and Nate and you know, the producers have done in the cast. So it's their baby. I mean, they're basing it on what Chris and I did, but Josh is a phenomenal writer. It's like, and I've seen the last build, so to speak, or last version of it, because I started working on the poster, a couple of posters, as a matter of fact, and some stuff for the film, credits and whatnot. But the first time, a couple times I watched it was just to get my head around it, and then I did watch it just to get some of the images. You've seen a
construction edit.
I'm sorry, say again? It just dropped out there. Hello?
Yeah. So you've seen an edit.
Yeah, I've seen the film. I mean, I was there for the filming, and that's when I saw the entire cast and said, I'm watched them all, and I said, you're all terrific. And I literally felt like I said, I'll walk, you know, it's like anybody gives you any crap, it's like they got to go through me. It's like, I don't have kids, but I'm the crazy uncle. So yeah, but it's like, and the film is really good. It's really, really good. And to what you said about the way it had been treated from the brass, I think that there was a lot of speculation going around that, you know, and talks about rewrites and reshoots and things like that. Didn't happen. I mean, the only thing that hadn't been shot that needed to be shot was one very specific scene, which had been planned. So it wasn't, you know, something like that. They needed to go back into it and reconfigure it. But the plus of it is they had given all of the attention to Phoenix, to the Dark Phoenix film. And I think that the brass sort of felt, you know, it had kind of didn't suffer by omission. It actually was benign. There was a benign kind of neglect where it was like they just left it over on the side, because at the time that the merger happened, or the devouring, or the whatever you want to call it, between Disney and Fox, that was the first time I was working on some poster ideas, and then everybody was up in the air about what was going to happen, and it took a while for it to sort of shake down or shake out. And then later on, after I'd seen the film, there were so many things in it that where I literally was in awe of how well it's done, because the characters, it's not only what Chris and I had done, but as a film and as an ensemble cast, you really care about these characters. It's like they're not. I wanted to know more, and I was very much sort of viewing at it as an audience member, kind of going, would I want to see more with these people? It's like watching Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. Yeah. It's like, you know, that kind of a thing. It's like all these characters, the way that they interact, it's like they so embody the characters. It's like I would definitely see them as an X-Men. It's like the second group of X-Men, like with the as opposed to, say, Patrick Stewart or whatever. I mean, not that all the newer actors aren't phenomenally talented, you know, but having seen the original version with Jackman and with Patrick Stewart and even, you know, the maligning that Halle Berry had gone under for, you know, it's like, you know, what happens when a frog is hit by electricity? It's like, you know,
never understood that.
Yeah,
I never understood.
Yeah.
I mean,
well,
that was the script. I mean,
Yeah.
that was the script.
That was the script, absolutely. But I think there were some other parts that kind of the linkage that actually made sense. But yeah, and I just think that they left it alone, and in a weird kind of a way, the fact that they did leave it alone, they didn't try to throw money at it the way that they did at the sort of they wanted that big blockbuster on with the Dark Phoenix film, and hence raising that the level of expectation. I think it's not a bloated Hollywood film. It's, you know, it's a really wonderful character study about kids. It's a horror film for sure. And what's fascinating about it is that it takes the horror tropes and subverts them, because, you know, usually you see in a horror film you get 6 characters or 5 characters, and then they make a series of dumb decisions like, I'm going to go in there by myself and check out that sound, you know, I'll be right back, you know, and, you know, the diminishing numbers doesn't happen in this case because they have to come together. So it takes that and subverts it, you know, but does it in an incredibly brilliant way.
That's what I'm looking forward to. I mean, if anything, I just want to see what the tone is, because I mean, like you say, we've seen the Hollywood take on X-Men. We've seen the big screen, the big epic. I want to see the I mean, like we saw with Legion, like we saw that real kind of character intimate pieces. That's what I'm looking forward to.
That's a great word that you said. The word intimate. It's very much about the characters. It's an intimate setting. It's an intimate story because it takes place pretty much in one setting, because like you know, as it did in the original run of the comic, you know, and I can't say enough about it. And I think that they do have it slated to come out, I think, in August, if I'm not mistaken.
It's somewhere. Well, I mean, the running joke that I've been saying online is I'll believe that New Mutants is coming out the moment I'm in a cinema or in front of a screen and I see the title card, New Mutants.
Right.
Please,
well,
let's
I've had
just
some discussions with the executives about, because like I said, I've been working on the poster, and so I've had some discussions about with the executives about a couple of things that are upcoming, which leads me to believe that it is moving forward. And I think that we all sort of feel, I mean, Maisie and Anya and Henry, you know, and everybody's like getting older. It's like they look back at them. I'm sure they're looking at themselves like, oh my God, I was such a kid in that, you know. But and there have been sort of series of false starts, but I do think that it will be worth the wait. Really, very much so. Yeah,
that's what we like to hear. Into the Blue Mister saying, I just hope it's not going to be another Inhumans. Yeah, I know where you're coming from on that. There's the story potential. I hope it delivers. And from what you're saying, that's great that we're going to hear that. Right, I'm going to ask one last, and then I'm going to let you get off. I'm going to let you go and enjoy the rest of your day. And this is more about, I mean, when people talk about you and the work that you've done, I mean, the same usual suspects come to the fore in conversation, and we've brought them up in this conversation today. And quite rightfully, they're great to look back on and talk about. But has there been a work or a project which you've worked on that you are especially proud of, that you feel hasn't had the attention, its time in its spotlight that it deserves?
You know, that's a good question. I mean, I sort of thinking of him as the person who sort of at each point, you know, like, because I'm so used to answering questions where people say, do you have a favorite? And it's like, like saying like picking my favorite kid, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I do feel like even with Toasters, which is sort of like a real bizarre piece of work, I do find that like the response in Europe was very different than the response in the States, and I do find that it sold well, but I find also that the fans of it are really rabid fans. It's like, and even if there's no superheroes associated with it, you know, and you know, even like with Moon Knight, the one difference there is that I felt like with Doug that he got the very sort of rough, raw version of me. It's like you know, like I was learning, not that we're not hopefully always learning, but I sort of felt like I was not fully formed. He sort of got the larval me. So I think that in terms of what my plans were for the character, might be a little bit different, you know, now if I were to revisit that. But yeah, there are a number of pieces that I look at where I feel like they didn't get the attention that they should have gotten, or conversely, like say for like even the Hendrix book, I look at that as I think it's art, visually, I feel like it's actually something I'm pretty proud of, but story wise and creatively, I look at that as kind of a failure because there were things that I wanted to try and do with it that I ended up having to negotiate or, you know, quote, pick my battles in terms of how I wanted to approach certain things. But the other aspect of that, of your question is that once I do anything, at a certain point, once it's out there, it's almost like it's not mine anymore. It's like people, I used to think, well, if I put a lot of time into this, then people are going to respond to it because they can tell. And then other times I've done things very quickly and they've sort of come together and it feels right. And so it has nothing to do with time. It has to do with I think a certain level of integrity, of like, if you're telling the story well,
honesty, I think, as well.
Yeah, honest. That's it exactly. So so yeah, I think I'm almost like I might have my own feelings, and they might change from one day to the next. But at a certain point, I almost feel like that's all. Like how I feel about it is almost irrelevant because it's out there, and if people love it, they love it. If they don't, they don't. But you know, to me, it's its own entity out there in the world, and for better or worse, it's, you know, people are responding to it the way that they are. So and I don't feel like that necessarily like I'm trying to abdicate with answering the question, you know, but I
think I got where you, I mean, I get where you're coming from, and I get what you're saying. If anything, because yeah, there is that sense of, I mean, I've done panels and I've talked to creators about that, and there is that sense of, I think I spoke to Dave Gibbons about Watchmen, about putting pages out and how the audience basically made it their own. To some degree, he doesn't feel that Watchmen belongs to him anymore.
Right. I can understand how you feel that way.
Because the concept and the ideas and the book itself, it's now means so much to so many other people that there is that sense of, you know, if you love something, set it free.
Well, yeah, absolutely. But at the same time, and it is that part of what I think made that work is that I don't think any other artist could have done and brought to it. I mean, it would not have been, it's obvious, but it's yet also not obvious because it's sort of like no other artist could have made Watchmen so distinctly Watchmen. Other artists might have come close, like, you know, or done something, but it would not have been the unique combination of those two great, you know, and John Higgins with the coloring as well, you know.
I mean, I've got the Watching the Watchmen book, the Chip Kidd piece on it, and I mean, I I came to opening that book rather naively because I enjoy Watchmen. I've got the absolute, I love the book, but it feels so natural and organic on the page. What David was doing with the absolute precision, creating a watch, and he was very much Osterman putting that book together. But you don't twig that until you really kind of start peeling apart the layers, and that sense of ownership is very, very impressive.
Yeah, it very much is true. And I think, well, it's like, just, you know, to add one other little note to your question, it's like when Frank and I did Elektra Assassin, we, you know, I would turn in pages, and Joe Duffy would, you know, or Archie would say, you know, call up Frank and say, Bill brought in pages. So we don't know quite what we're looking at, you know, because it was so different than what any of it expected. Certainly what I'd expected, because I would just do the pages and it'd be like this puddle of sweat at the end, and I go like, I don't know what this is, but it felt the way to approach it, like there was something there. And I think that we thought that when the book would come out, that we would get some kind of response, you know, either love or hate. What we got immediately in the aftermath was just silence for about a week and a half, 2 weeks. And I think it took a while for people to sort of talk to each other and say, well, what did you think? It was like, it was sort of the shock of the new. So, you know, even with us, in terms of what we thought, you know, there was a point when Frank and I said, well, I guess we just, you know, chalk it up as a miss, and let's go back to something else.
Really?
You know?
Okay. Yeah. I'd have thought the conversation would be more like, they either get it, they either dig it, or they don't. Like you say, we're back to the whole jazz conversation again.
Exactly.
They either dig the riffs. We're very much going Minkus on this one, but I mean, you either dig the groove or you don't.
Right. Well, I think with Frank, Frank is so, and he and I both, we share this in a way where we do something, and I think that the last thing we'd rather have people despise something than ignore it, than feel apathetic about it. So in a weird way, we were almost expecting, like, it's like we hope the thing we don't want is silence, and that was the thing that threw us. But once, you know, the sort of floodgates did open, they really opened. But you know, but for a week there, I think we were both pretty confused, because it was sort of like, how could they not at least hate this? It's like, you know, I mean, hopefully they'll love it, you know, but how could they at least not go like, what the is this, you know? But you know, you never know. And that's what I mean about it. Once it goes out there, it is no longer, you know, whoever did it, you know, directed, write, acted, musically or otherwise.
Makes sense. Sense. Final couple of comments. I mean, Into the Blue Mister is pointing out a personal favorite is his, Brought to Light, which he feels deserved. Well. Yeah. And also making the comment, I told you it wasn't going to be the last thing he said. Interesting take on the combination thing. Makes you think what would happen if David Lloyd had drawn Watchmen and if David Gibbons had drawn V for Vendetta. Whoa, that's going to be a mental exercise that's going to take my evening.
Yeah, that's the I was going to say. That'll be, well, you know, when you're doing it, you'll just across the pond, just imagining me doing the same thing. Yeah.
Bloody hell. And Rob Salkowitz is dropping by as well. He's saying, two of my favorite people. Oh, you're one of mine. So there you go.
We got three of our favorite people together here at this moment. So yes.
Good to hear from you, Rob. Right, we'll let you get off. We will.
This has been an absolute pleasure, and you know. So hey, if we did, it's like, just look at this as the other hour from the last time I didn't make it. So it's all, we'll just put it together. You know, it was a continued as. So
I appreciate that.
But absolutely my pleasure, and thank you everybody for the questions and the comments, and for, you know, for your understanding in terms of last time. So it's been a real pleasure. So thank you. And hope to see you in person sometime.
Oh, good God, yes, please. Yeah.
Yeah.
Something that we've been doing on the show, and I think this is how we'll wrap up on the episode. And the post that I put up and you saw of the Brian Dennehy thing that we put up, and you may see your details there on screen, guys, everyone. Those are the links you need to check out. This was off something that we did for this particular run of episodes during lockdown. I wanted to showcase artists that were really putting things out onto social media that were kind of sort of brightening up people's social media in this real difficult time.
Right.
And we'll wrap up on this. Is there any artists that you have spotted on your social media feeds, on your Instagram or on your Twitter or on your Facebook or wherever, that has really kind of made you look forward to their work during lockdown? Not necessarily kind of retro pieces that they've put up and just gone, oh, this is what I did a year ago or whatever, but something that they've been doing during lockdown to keep their feed going. Is there any feeds that have been?
Yeah, there's a number of painters that I've been following on Instagram that I don't have. I mean, their names like right at the tip of my tongue.
We'll find them. We'll put them in the description.
Okay,
Go for it.
Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah, and I'll add to that, but I'll look them up. But yeah, there are there's a number of people both in comics and outside of comics as well. So yeah, I'll get you those in the info, and we can add to that. So, but
fair enough.
Thank you so much.
No worries. Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you. We showed the link. We showed the link up on the screen. But where is ideally the best place for people to see work that you do? Is it Instagram? Is it Twitter? If you want to point
on all the media. I mean, I'll post a lot of my own stuff on Facebook, but I'm also out there on Twitter at Sienkiewicz, SINKEVITCH, and Instagram. I have my own, which is the real that Polish guy, and then there's also Bill Sienkiewicz Art, which is through Sal and the team who put out. They keep my stuff out there constantly. Yeah. So.
I think I may have to use you as my conduit to kind of build some bridges, because I did kind of upset Sal, and yeah.
Oh well, we'll talk, because it's I was going to say if Sal's upset you, you may have done something right. It's like I try to upset him every time I get it. It's like, keeps things real between us. It's like, we're still brothers, right? Because we're fighting. No, it's like, no, I love him. I'm sure you guys will be fine. But we'll talk.
Fair enough. Bill, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much indeed for coming on. And
thank you.
This is easily been a highlight of this particular run of episodes. Thank you so much indeed for taking time. And
absolutely my pleasure. Anytime.
Stay safe, and
you as well.
Yeah, look after
yourself. And my best to your dad.
Thank you.
And
I hope finally, when the move is finished, that everything is in place and the house is looking good.
Yeah, absolutely. And then if we do another one of these, it'll be, like right now you can tell, like I've got cardboard boxes behind me for my paintings, and it's rather dark in here right now. But I think that the big difference will be there will be a lot more sun. So in the newer dig. So we'll have to do this again with sort of like where I've descended. Like right now I'm in the hole. We'll do one where I'm above ground in the sunlight. So we'll do a metaphorical thing out of it.
I would love to have you back anytime, sir.
It'd be my pleasure.
Excellent
Thank
stuff.
you, and thank you so much again. And everybody, thank you so much for all the great questions and for tuning in.
Excellent. Take care, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Wow. So there you go. That was an epic show. And well worth the time. An interesting conversation with an interesting guy. And I really hope you enjoyed that. It was well worth the wait, wasn't it? Bill Sienkiewicz joining us on the show. Right. We were going to talk about some things that are happening in the industry at the moment. But obviously that is, we'll cover that certainly on the show that we're going to be doing on Sunday. We have ourselves two very interesting people returning to the show. We've got ourselves, oh, hang on, wrong graphic, try again. We have this graphic here, which is what I want to pull up. There we go. It's the last episode of the month. It's Russ Burlingame from comicbook.com and Mike Avelia returning to talk about everything that has happened in the last month, considering that, I mean, we talked about this the last time they were on. Things are happening and changes take place on a daily basis. And safe to say, the last month, we have had so much happening. So yes, we will be talking about Comic Book Legal Defense Fund. We'll be talking about various revelations that have come out in the last 48 hours, which has certainly led to an almost Me Too moment in comics today. We're also going to be talking about DC. We're going to be talking about all sorts of stuff. It's going to be cool to have them back. Russ Burlingame and Mike Avelia are going to be joining us this Sunday, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. GMT, and we'll get into all sorts of stuff. Thank you so much indeed for joining us. It's been one hell of a show. We're 2 hours, 40 minutes. How about that for an epic episode? I hope you've enjoyed it. I mean, we've got Dan Berry having a great time. Yes, I didn't bring up the New Mutants piece that he did on the cover because I think that's been talked to enough. I didn't want to kind of labor the point, but I'm grateful for it. And it's Dan, thank you so much indeed for getting that to me. Into the Blue Mister, did I just dream all of that? You're asking me, man. You're asking me. Good God. And Aaron Neighbors loved it. I really am glad that everyone's enjoyed it. Thank you so much indeed for tuning in. We're back again, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. GMT. Mike Avelia and Russ Burlingame on the return for those two on Talkin Con, a cup of tea with an Englishman in San Diego. From myself, Leonard, and from BILL SIENKIEWICZ, take care, stay safe, wear your masks, wash your hands, and we'll see you on Sunday. Take care.